make sure that I'm in the office in time. So it looks like we are ready to go for another meeting of the Rotary Club of Livermore. So as Alan's getting ready here, so welcome to the meeting. And this is the time where I'll remind you, I mentioned this earlier when we were chatting, that there is a functionality where you can toggle between the size of what you see on the screen and your gallery view or your speaker view. And you have to hover your mouse if you're, and this is on a laptop. I don't know if you're on a mobile device or a tablet, whether you have this functionality. There's 2 vertical lines, and if you hover your mouse in between the split of those screens, you can actually move those screens in back and forth. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So we are ready for our Pledge of Allegiance, and I am going to, Irv, would you be willing to lead us in the pledge? And I am going to ask, because I think it will turn out better, if everybody mutes themselves, but as Rotarians, we'll know that you'll all be saying the pledge along with Irv. So I'm going to mute myself now and allow Irv to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, whatever. Thank you.
Liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Irv. All right, so Michael, you're solo today.
Oh, this is a family member for me.
Thank you very much, Michael. So the technology that they're putting together then. So thought for the day, Wendy.
Great, thank you for this opportunity to share the thought for the day. Often when folks have seemed in a lull in their lives, as many of us have experienced with sheltering, I've found it's helpful to ask them to think about what they wanted to do when they were about 17. Thinking? Hope it's a happy memory for you. I'm practicing my piccolo. Alan's laughing. And by the way, Malvina, I will tell you more about Malvina Reynolds, who wrote that Little Boxes. She's on my family tree. Love that song. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for letting me do this. Bye-bye.
By the way, the background image on that song was actually Daly City, which is what caused her to write that song, was seeing that view.
That's right. Yep.
I apologize for being late. So I want to say thank you to Alan. I know what he used for an image. I lived on the south side of Mount Davidson, and so I saw that whole engineering feat go up and watch those houses go up on that hill.
You could have written the song,
Wendy.
All right.
Say again?
So Michael
Wonderful.
could have written the song.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Michael. That was very appropriate for today. And thank you for your thought, Wendy. That's a great way for us to always keep positive in our thoughts as we're going through our current situation. So our meeting front line, our Zoom host extraordinaire, who helped us all learn about breakout rooms, Spur reporter, Kathy Coyle, our AV guy extraordinaire, Alan Frank, and our Spur publisher, Don Wentz. Or maybe Kathy will do some self-publishing this week. Thank you.
Kathy will do it. Kathy will do it.
Okay, Kathy will do it. So right now is time to introduce if we have any visiting Rotarians. I know we have a few in the room. If you could introduce yourselves, or I did see Jill.
Yeah, so let me go first. I'm Jill Dury from the Morning Club, or the Livermore Valley Club, if you'd prefer. Glad to be here and looking forward to Mike's talk.
All right, any other visiting Rotarians? Okay.
I believe Mike Paddock is a visiting Rotarian.
Yep, and we'll get to, Pat will introduce him, but welcome Mike as a visiting Rotarian as well. Mike is our speaker today. And how about any guests? I know we have a few guests as well. Pat, would you like to introduce your guests?
Yes, we have Javier and Victoria Andrade who have joined us. I'm not sure in the participants list if any of the other Engineers Without Borders folks came in. But those are the two guests that we spotted early on, and that I'm glad to have them here.
All right, any other guests? If you'd like to unmute yourselves. Steve Neff, you're a guest?
I guess I'm a guest, but I don't think I need to be introduced.
Okay, welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
Any other guests joining us today? We're glad that you're here. Welcome to all of you. Okay, so as you know, today was my day 67 of walking Livermore. And a reminder that I saw early on, and I think this was actually in the end of April. So if we look at the next photo that I took, you can see that the streets are used as billboards. And this is a reminder to complete the census. I took this photo back in April, but there are still time to do that if you haven't already. I am on an email distribution list for updates from Scott Haggerty. And so he's kind of keeping track and making it to see which of the cities in District 1 are actually, he's looking at the response rate. And we are in the lead with almost 77% of the citizens for Livermore have completed it, compared to 73% for Fremont and 71% for Dublin. So hopefully all of you have already completed the census. If you haven't, go to 2020census.gov. And if you know somebody who hasn't completed it, please help them do so and encourage them to do so. As you all know, that's how dollars flow back into our local communities. Dollars are going to be tight, so it'll be important that everybody gets counted. So thank you very much.
It's also important that non-citizens be counted as well as citizens. Everyone is to be counted. That's in the Constitution.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Alan. So everybody, make sure that you've completed the census if you haven't already, and help those who need help. So up next. So I'd like to invite Pat McMiniman to give us an update about Rotary International Foundation. Is Pat with us?
I see Patrick's iPhone.
I'm here now. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, President Carolyn. I'm very excited to tell everyone about our plans for kicking off the 2020-21 campaign for our club's giving to the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International. And as we heard during President Carolyn's first meeting on July 8th, one of the goals that she has set for our club during this year is that every member of our club will take the opportunity to make a donation to either the Rotary Foundation's annual fund or Polio Plus fund. And President Carolyn has graciously proposed you decide how much you want to donate to the Rotary Foundation's annual fund or Polio Plus fund. However, let's show our club's solid support for the Rotary Foundation of RI. And we want this year to be a year when every member of our club has donated something to the Rotary Foundation. So this week we're kicking off our club's 2020-21 Rotary Foundation RI campaign. This year's theme is Every Rotarian, Every Year, which is the commitment that our club will make, and I think it will achieve, that by the end of the year, June 30th of 2021, each of us will have given something to the Rotary Foundation of RI. So let me tell you about our giving goals for this year. We've dialed back a bit given the current circumstances. So our club's giving goals for this year are $30,000 for the annual fund and $10,000 for the Polio Plus Fund of the Rotary Foundation. So I don't know, Alan, if you've had a chance to prepare the pledge card we have. There it is. Thank you, Alan Frank. So thanks to Alan's technical abilities, you can see on the screen now a copy of the pledge card. And just to put everybody at ease here, I'm going to be chatting for a few more minutes about the pledge card. I'll try to make it brief, but we're going to send this out to you with some additional information that will repeat what I'm saying right now. We'll get this out to you either later this afternoon or tomorrow sometime. So on the pledge card, as I think you can see on the screen, there are about 4 basic levels of giving, starting with the entry level of $25. As Carolyn has said, that's like the cost of a lunch or this or that, you name it. So starting with the entry level of $25 and going up through 3 other levels, including the grand sustainer level of $1,000. So when you receive the email, I'd like you to take a look at the details on the pledge card. At this point, we're just asking folks to make a pledge. And what I'd like you to do, there are 2 ways you can make a pledge. You can send me an email that states the amount of your pledge and whether you want it to go to the Polio Plus Fund or the annual fund. Or you can just give me a call and say, hey, Pat, calling with my pledge, here it is, and tell me your pledge amount. And then this year, we're really encouraging folks to use the online donation portal at the Rotary.org website. And I'm just going to say it here once because it's going to be coming to you in the email, but it's myrotary.org donate. So you'll see the details on that when you get the email, and we'll get that out to you today or tomorrow. So thanks in advance to all of you for your continuing what has been a great track record by this club of very generous giving to the Rotary Foundation, and looking forward to seeing our levels of giving, and as well as the number of members in our club, seeing those levels rise as the year goes on. So back to you, Carolyn. Thank you for giving us this time to chat that much about this year's giving campaign.
Thank you very much, Pat. And then I just remind everybody that, remember last week I announced our Area 4 Global Grant was approved, and that is almost $97,000 that's going to be go back in our community for COVID-19 responses to local healthcare organizations. That all comes through because of our very generous giving through to the Rotary Foundation. So I just echo Pat, and then just encourage everybody to think about the level that you can give this year, and encourage everybody to at least donate something, even if it's the entry level of $25. So,
Carolyn,
yes.
I have a question for Pat.
Okay, can it be answered in 10 seconds, Hank?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there an address that we should send the checks to?
Yes, Hank, I'll answer that for you. That address will be in the email.
Thank you.
And that will be, yes, so you'll have that there. So if you prefer to give via check. And now, so we would like to, I think it's important for us, since we're not seeing each other, to at least all get a chance to hear from each other. And today, John Gordon is going to give us a member talk. So welcome, John.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. Welcome to all my fellow Rotarians. I was born in Washington, D.C., about 10 blocks from the Capitol building, which you see behind me. We lived in the D.C. area until I was 8 years old. My dad became a construction manager for a company that built power plants, and each of his assignments would take about 18 months to 2 years. Then we would move to the next assignment. Most of those assignments were in Pennsylvania, and I graduated from high school in York, Pennsylvania. After a short stint in the Army, I enrolled at Penn State. I paid for college myself, so I was always working hard and had a variety of jobs that would fit with my class schedules. The best job on campus I had in 4 years paid me $1.60 an hour. The summer between my second and third years, my father was able to get me a job as a Boilermaker, where I earned $6.50 an hour with a company named Combustion Engineering. I made so much in those 2 summers that I was able to pay all of my tuition for the second and third year, or third and fourth years. More about that in a minute. During my senior year, I finally moved off campus. The winters in central Pennsylvania are brutal, very cold and a lot of snow. One Sunday morning, I was at the local Save Mart getting the Sunday paper. There were about a dozen other guys standing around drinking coffee. They were there to get their papers too. It was snowing that day, and they were all grumbling about how awful it was to have to go out in such awful weather to get their papers. I decided to create a new business. Got up at 3 o'clock in the morning so that I could be there when the papers were delivered, and I asked the driver if he would deliver papers to me on a street corner. He had somebody call me, and I got it set up. I made some flyers about my cash in advance delivery service, offering to deliver a choice of 3 papers: the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pittsburgh Press, and the New York Times. I walked door to door with those flyers, leaving one at every house. I had an older Ford convertible back then, and I would put the top down so that I could stack papers in the back seat. My pricing was pretty aggressive. I was making more than $2 a paper. It was hard work, but my little business made me more than $300 every 5 hours every Sunday morning. At the end of the year, I had about 180 customers, and I didn't have any trouble selling my business. During my senior year, I applied to a few companies for accounting positions, including Combustion Engineering, which was a big conglomerate. The guy that interviewed me didn't know much about all the things that the company did. He was pretty impressed about how much I knew from being a Boilermaker, and they hired me. My first position there was as an internal auditor. I traveled all over the United States on audit assignments. After 9 years with Combustion, I took a job with a West Coast company named ITEL. They had a Connecticut office that they were planning to relocate to San Francisco. I had an office on the 36th floor of Embarcadero number 1 with a postcard-like view of Alcatraz and the Golden Gate Bridge. I was pretty impressed with myself. Not long after moving to San Francisco, the company started to fall apart and ended up filing for bankruptcy. Took a new position as corporate controller for a much smaller construction equipment company. In that job, I did some traveling: Sacramento, Los Angeles, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, Australia. I also made 2 trips to one of our facilities in Bougainville, Papua New Guinea. I really enjoyed the traveling. My wife and I adopted a 2-year-old girl in 1983, and then 2 more children in 1985. In 1985, took a position with a large printing company that had 13 divisions. I was the general manager of a division in Mountain View. I really enjoyed that job. About a year later, I got fired. It created a real dilemma for me since my education and most of my employment was in accounting, but I really didn't like accounting. While I was looking for employment leads in the San Jose Mercury News, I came across the listing for a very small printing company for sale in Livermore. The shop had only made a few small sales and only had one repeat customer, LARPD. One day while walking around town handing out business cards, I met Dave and Yvonne Hopkins. They had a business doing something new called desktop publishing that fascinated me. We became good friends and still are. The business struggled for the first year or so, but things improved as time passed. And now 32 years later, I'm still in the printing business and still enjoying it. In March of 1992, one of my customers invited me to a Rotary meeting. At that time, I was working 60-hour weeks. The idea of having a 2-hour lunch every Wednesday seemed impossible. I did finally attend the meeting, and I so enjoyed it that I joined in May. I ended up having perfect attendance for more than 15 years. I enjoy everything in Rotary. I became the newsletter editor in 1993, and under the guidance of my close friend David Lowell, we elevated the quality of the Spur to a point where we won a district award for it 3 years in a row. One of the things of which I'm most proud is having been chosen to serve as this club's president for the 2004-2005 year. Being the president is quite demanding and takes a lot of time. It's also very satisfying to be the leader of a club that can get so much done. I treasure that memory. Those 3 little kids we adopted are still close and mean the world to me.
That's all, folks.
Thank you very much, John. Wow, aren't we lucky that you chose to buy that business? And a little bit of history of LARPD and how we go forward. Up next. All right, so last week we celebrated birthdays, but unfortunately Wendy was left off in error. So happy birthday, happy July birthday, Wendy. So I'm also going to give my little plug for DACDB. That's our database that we use of all club members. Remember, Kathy shared that you can go in and update your records to make sure that your birthday and anniversaries are up to date. So that's my plug for DACDB. And next, this is a first for me, the first time I have the honor of recognizing a Rotarian of the quarter. And I would like to announce that for this past quarter, April, May, and June, the board elected to honor our dear Gaud Mamula. So congratulations, Gaud. And Gaud, we wanted to recognize Gaud for coming up with the idea back, I can't keep track of dates anymore. A month or so ago when Gaud wanted to initiate kind of a brag session with donations to go along with it. So thank you very much, Gaud, and really for your long-term support of the club and the Rotary Foundation and all that you do in our community here locally and as well as abroad in India. So congratulations, Gaud.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. And I think I feel like it's a duty of everyone to do their share of it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Gown. And next, so as you know, Glenn Kubiak has been doing an extraordinary job of leading us into Zoom, transitioning us into Zoom, but he also does an extraordinary job as our club treasurer, and doing both jobs is just too much. And as earlier when we were chatting, Niall, you said Rotarians always say yes to, and Rotarians are people of action. So this is our opportunity to be a people of action to support our club and building up a team. This will be, think of this as our virtual front desk, the people that make our meetings happen and make our virtual meetings happen. So an open invitation, if you would like to help with all of the logistics that happens that we don't all see, we just show up, but there's a lot of background work that has to help. Please contact Glenn, or right now you could put your name in the chat that you are interested in helping with that. You don't have to have the skills now. You can be trained, as we're all learning. So thank you very much to Glenn and all the efforts that he's done with that, and we'll build up that team for people to be involved. You're all here, so you've all learned something new about Zoom, and you could continue to learn more if you'd like to. So next week's program, our own Kim Perrine will give an important presentation on unconscious bias, and I very much look forward to what Ken has to say about this. I've been doing my own learning about unconscious bias and just how it's just part of who we are, but we need to be aware of it so that we can make conscious decisions when we become aware of our unconscious bias. So I thank Ken for doing that for next week's program. And then before I present or talk about this week's program, one other quick announcement that wasn't on the list, and just to let you know, everybody wants to know, what about the crab feed? So heads up, Jay Davis is going to lead the working group to make some decisions to answer that question. So if you, Jay's kind of pulling together the team that has all of the experience with that, and he'll come back to us in the future so we know what we're looking for. But if you want to send emails Jay's way, Jay may not like that I just said that, but send suggestions Jay's way, and he'll look at all of the factors that will come into play. So next, I'd like to invite Pat Coyle to introduce our guest speaker.
Well, this is my distinct pleasure. The write-up for Mike is kind of the standard stuff, so I'll clear that real quickly. He grew up in northern Minnesota, attended Michigan Technological University with bachelor's degrees in civil engineering and surveying. He's a licensed professional engineer and surveyor whose professional career at CH2M Hill was spent managing teams of over 100 engineers, designing infrastructure projects exceeding $1 billion. He was the youngest ever recipient of Wisconsin's Engineer of the Year Award. After a near-death cancer experience, he was motivated to begin a pro bono engineering career that's delivered over 100 projects with Engineers Without Borders USA, Rotary International, and other nonprofits on 5 continents over the last 20 years. He currently lives in Southwest Wisconsin with his wife, Kathy. That's the canned stuff. What I've also got to tell you is Mike's just a great guy. I've met him and have over a number of Engineers Without Borders conferences where I've been a member since 2005. He's generous of his time as well. We recently had him join our own Engineers Without Borders Nicaragua project for the water supply system on a trade study for tanks. Very generous to join us and participate in that. We also have Mike to thank for helping our Area 4 team be able to pivot from a Rotary Global Grant Project application where we were planning to do Rachel educational servers but couldn't, to instead deploy that to COVID-19 response for a hospital in Esquintla, Guatemala, the very same community that we were planning to do the project with. So with that, I'll let Mike take it from there. He's just a great guy. Take it away, Mike.
All right. Thank you so much, Pat. Wow, what a great introduction. And always wonderful to spend time with Rotarians. Greetings from the Rotary Club of Milwaukee and District 6270. And just a little plug for Pat's message as a major donor for Rotary International. Supporting the foundation is so very, very important. And it has its own set of rewards. So that message definitely resonated with me. And thank you, Pat, for inviting me to speak today and share some of my experiences around the program that we've been able to work on in Guatemala. Today, what I'll talk a little bit about is some history and background, particularly around one of our first programs that we did there about 15 years ago, and then how those relationships have been built into responding to a disaster from Volcano Fuego, and then currently the impacts of COVID-19 in our program wrapped around that. This project, the initial project that we did back in 2005 was really wrapped around these amazing ladies. And these are midwives. Gavina is seated on the right, and on the left is Josefa. And as you probably know, midwives are really the center of a community's healthcare system. They not only deliver babies, but they treat everything from a machete cut to COVID-19. They're really almost like a physician's assistant, if you will. And in many places, they also believe that they're called by God to be midwives. And I don't know about you, but I would feel much more comfortable if I knew that my doctor had been called by God to take care of me. They know what they're doing and they're professionals. They've received training. And in this particular case, they approached Rotary because they had two barriers that were keeping them from reaching their dreams of a healthy community. One was access to the hospital, and the other was clean water. You see, the access to the hospital was blocked by the Rio Motagua, which was nicknamed the Assassin because of all the deaths that had occurred due to people trying to swim the river. Gavina had told me the story about she would visit an expectant mother and she would be able to feel the fetus and know in her heart that the mother was in for trouble. She knew it was turned the wrong way and the mother needed a cesarean section. But there was nothing she could do. She couldn't access the healthcare facility. So all she could do is trudge back up to her house and light a candle and say a little prayer for her friend and her neighbor. You see, that was just part of the problem. The other was access to clean water. During childbirth, they didn't have sufficient water that was safe to be able to wash the baby, the mother, and themselves to protect themselves from infections. During this time, 2 to 3 babies each year were dying from infant mortality. And one mother on average each year would lose her life during childbirth. And you need to realize that this is a very close-knit community. So that one mother was likely a friend and or a neighbor to these midwives. Very much a frustrating situation. Sadly, this community is not alone. Even today, 2 billion people around the planet do not have access to safe wash in their healthcare facilities. And as a civil engineer, I find that just mind-boggling. This story is also rooted in a gentleman by the name of Don Michael Shawcross, and he's kind of a character of all characters. He's a British citizen that as a young age, he decided he was going to hitchhike from England all the way to China on 20 pounds, if you can imagine that. And that adventuresome spirit then took him to Canada, where he explored caves, and finally to Guatemala, where his love of caving brought him there, but it was his love affair with the people and their culture that kept him there working for over 40 years. Fortunately for me, for some reason, he took me underneath his wing and shared with me all of his lessons learned and all of the experiences that he had. And I was so much the better for it. And these are the lessons learned that I outlined in the book that Pat mentioned called Bridging Barriers. You know, before I met Don Mike, I thought that I had the development answers. And then I met him and I realized I didn't even know the questions. One of the most important lessons that Don Mike taught me is that all of the improvements, all of the projects need to come from within the community itself. You cannot help anyone who does not want to be helped, Don Mike would say. And it's critical that the timing of the projects are done at the right moment. He would refer to it as the 3 R's. You need to have the right project for the right people at the right time. And I can't imagine how much money would have been saved around this globe in the development world if those 3 simple things had been followed by many aid organizations. How many times are projects driven by aid organizations or donors' priorities and not the communities? And sadly, they many times result in unsustainable solutions. This particular picture shows the solicitation from the community, and it was one of about 24 sheets that showed the support. People there didn't know how to read and write, so they would show their support with thumbprints to show that they were requesting this particular project. The story goes that when they presented this project to Don Mike at his favorite restaurant in Antigua, as they were getting up to leave and Don Mike was explaining to them that he would give the project a thorough assessment, he also the community brought out a live turkey from underneath a coat and gave it to him in the middle of the restaurant. Now, Don Mike, being a bachelor, didn't really know what to do with that turkey, so he gave it to the nearest waitress because he had no idea how to prepare it. But it certainly created quite the commotion in the restaurant at that time. This is when Don Mike had reached out to Rotarians as well as Engineers Without Borders, specifically the Marquette University chapter, for assistance. And Marquette was a very good fit for this program because their motto, university motto, is "Be the Difference." Several different design teams were involved, and they were committed to be the difference to remove these barriers to the community's success. This picture just shows the events at the groundbreaking ceremony. And it was pretty significant. What we're doing here is we're moving rocks to build a cofferdam and a temporary support in the middle of this big river. And the significant outcomes were really twofold. One, there were 14 communities involved in this project. And so having everybody work side by side, passing a heavy load to each other and having to rely on each other, I think was significant. And it really demonstrated the cooperation that was going to be needed. The second thing was that it was very visible as this pier rose up out of the river and was really pretty impressive. I think everybody then realized what they could do when they all worked together. And after we completed this assignment, I think we all realized, including myself, that by golly, I think we can do this. This is one of my favorite photos because everybody sees something different here. Some people, like the engineers, might see the 3 concrete mixers that run simultaneously to be able to deliver the concrete for the bridge. Other people might see the wheelbarrows that are in an endless loop delivering the concrete out to the bridge deck. And then my wife will point out the 2 ladies hustling across the temporary bridge with tortillas on their heads, because we all know that any work crew works on its stomach. It's always amazing to me that one picture can say so many different things to different people. Of course, after the bridge was done, we weren't done. Gavina reminded us that we needed to get the clean water to her community. And the project was basically to take a spring that you see where the star is in the lower left and deliver it to a distribution tank, which is the square kind of in the middle of the photo. And then it would feed down into a distribution system. Looks pretty straightforward, although all the piping was about 20 miles long. But then when you look at the picture on the mountainside, you realize the difficulties that lay ahead. Up and over mountains, through ravines, crossing rivers, and cutting through forests. And then you realized that that entire trench needed to be dug by hand. Work crews of about 100 people would work throughout the summer, and each worker would be assigned each day about a 30 feet stretch of trench to be dug. If you were lucky, you dug through soft soil. If you're unlucky, you might have to plow through roots, stones, and maybe even stumps. Finally, we were able to complete the system and the water was turned on for the first time. Now, I know these people don't look very excited, but trust me, they really are. They are in the classic Guatemalan pose of not showing their teeth for a photo. But I can tell you that this mother's heart is jumping right out of her chest. And those of you that have participated in water projects know that there's nothing like turning on the water for a community the first time. The water flows down from that tank to the first house, and the family shouts with joy as it comes out of the spigot. And then through gravity, it flows to the next house, and the next house, and the next house, each time with squeals of delight. And the reason for this, as Gavina explained to me, is that it really is a transformational experience. You see, as Gavina said, she, her entire life, had to fetch water from the river for her family, just like her mother did and her grandmother. And a mother like we see in this particular photo was forced with an unenviable position of having to figure out which of her daughters would be able to go to school and which would be allowed, which had to stay home and fetch water. A decision that no mother should have to make. And when Gavina explained this all to me, she got angry, very angry, because you need to realize she knows all of these gals. She knows how smart they are. She knows that they have an incredible amount of talent if they could not just be wasted to be beasts of burden to carry water. They could be doctors, lawyers, school teachers, maybe even engineers, if they just were given a chance. This is the barrier that providing clean water gave to the community. But the project wasn't done. At this point, after it was all completed, there were several tests to the project. And in 2010, there was a large hurricane that came called Hurricane Agatha that ravaged the community. And in this particular part of the country, there was a large landslide that blocked the Assassin, the Rio Motagua. And as that pooled up water behind it, pretty soon it broke free, creating a tidal wave of water all the way to the Atlantic coast. It washed out every bridge, except you guessed it, one. And I was down doing disaster response in another part of the country when I saw this article in the paper referring to the unbeatable bridge. And I have to say, to this day, it still results in me getting phone calls from people in the area because they want to know how the bridge was built so that it could withstand such a load. And the stories and the rumors continue to go. Some people say it was because of a magic Mayan blessing that might have been put on the bridge. One of my favorites where there was a thought that I had mixed bull's blood with the concrete to make it stronger. But of course, in the end, I always have to admit that it was purely dumb luck. You know, it's not very often as a civil engineer that we get a chance to go back 10 years after a program has been completed and do an impact analysis. And that's the fortunate position that I was able to be in about 18 months ago. After these barriers were removed, the community completely took charge of their future. They formed health committees that included the school and the new clinic. They formed advocacy groups to keep an eye on the most vulnerable people in the community and even accompanied them to the hospital because many had never been outside the community before. Gavina and the midwives worked with the school director to do health and hygiene training for not only the children, but the adults in the community as well. And as the midwives would visit the households on their home visits, they reinforced those health and hygiene training procedures so that people didn't fall back into those old habits. The results were amazing. Infant and maternal mortality had been completely eliminated over the last 10 years. School absences were reduced from 300 per month to just 2. And now, more girls were attending the school because they were no longer treated as beasts of burden to carry water. I think this really speaks to the Rotary way, because once we are able to remove these barriers for communities, they're able to thrive and succeed on their own. So just a little plug for my book. You can get this on Amazon. or you could send me a note. Also, there's a website, Bridging Barriers, and it outlines the 17 lessons that Don Mike had shared with me on community development, wrapped around some interesting stories. All the proceeds from the book go to the Guatemala program that is being hosted by the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, as well as the Vista Hermosa Club in Guatemala. But this success really set us up for bigger things down the road. And we were not aware of how we were going to be challenged until June of 2018, almost 2 years ago, when Volcano Fuego erupted. At that time, several communities were destroyed, over 500 people lost their lives, and thousands of people were displaced. And this just shows the huge ash cloud rolling in and onto one of the communities. Rotary responded like never before, and this is before Rotary had its disaster program that is currently in place. So we had the district down in Guatemala had formed a committee. We had focused on 3 areas, which was food and shelter for the people who are displaced, getting healthcare facilities back up and running, as well as bridges to restore access to communities that were going to return to their homes. It's during this time that we built key relationships, not only between Rotarians, but the government. So Conrad, which is similar to our FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers of Guatemala led the response. And actually, this is the platoon that was assigned to me during our bridge construction project when I lived down there for 6 months. And this is just a picture of one of the 6 bridges that we were able to build during that time. Now, fast forward to the COVID-19 response. Fortunately, those relationships are all still in place, and we needed them to respond to COVID in an effective way. Working with Conrad again, the Ministry of Health, and the Army Corps of Engineers. Our funders were still in place, so we could go back to Guatemalan banks and businesses, and we're able to raise over $1 million for the effort. We've processed to date 3 global grants that have accumulated about $500,000, and Engineers Without Borders was able to provide about $320,000 of funding as well. It all started with an assessment tool that was developed for these challenging times, where we could literally use a cell phone that could receive the survey over a WhatsApp message, be completed by the healthcare facility, and sent back up to a cloud for review. This information then informed our response, which again was food security, but also local manufacturing for personal protective equipment for healthcare facilities, and WASH for the healthcare facilities themselves. We were able to work with local manufacturers that had been identified by Rotarians in Guatemala, supporting them with biomedical engineers here in the States so that they could change their manufacturing processes and move from making other products to personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. We were able to get 12 different manufacturers up and established and approved by the Ministry of Health, and generate over 200,000 pieces of PPE for use in our 12 evaluating hospitals. As for the WASH and healthcare facilities, we focused on building triage or waiting rooms because of the additional patients, but we also had a lot of effort around water supply. You see, not only did we have additional patients coming in, but each patient needs more water than the average patient from before. This is really a double whammy on that water supply. So we worked to replace pumps, putting in larger pumps, lowering them down into the boreholes so that they would be able to have more capacity, as well as addressing wash facilities like bathrooms and hand washing stations. This is just a picture of our current global grant that thank you so much for your support at your club and your district. It's the pediatric hospital in Esquimalt, and it's a large facility. It has 270 beds. We were able to do some emergency repair work at the wells to be able to squeeze out 10,000 additional liters per day for the facility, but the wells are 40 years old and they're made of old cast iron, and so they've really come to the end of their useful life. So the global grant will be replacing the water supply with a new well that's 600 feet deep and new elevated storage tanks that would now provide water for the entire hospital facility. And once again, thank you so much for your support. So with that, just one last plug for the book, because we are trying to raise some money for our current program, which is coming up with parts for repairing ventilators. You know, one of the things that we found is a lot of people are talking about making ventilators, but in many countries, half or more of the ventilators in country are already broken. And the reason for that is not that people are lazy, it's because the supply chain for the parts for many of these ventilators, particularly ones that are maybe out of date, like a lot of them that were donated by the US Army in Guatemala, is completely broken. So for us to be able to work with them to find alternate parts and reestablish that supply chain and get those ventilators repaired, which are the ones that the physicians are used to using, so there's no training, is really an important program that can make a difference. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up and see if there's any questions. And thank you once again for allowing me to come and share my story.
Thank you very much, Mike. That is just wonderful to see Engineers Without Borders and Rotarians and other communities coming together, community members coming together in such an impactful way. So questions for Mike. Why don't we first try to use the raise your hand function? If anybody has a question there in Zoom in the participant list, or we'll then go to looking on the screen and seeing who has hands raised. And I'm not seeing it. Do people have anybody have their hand raised?
Joel has his hand up.
So Joel?
Let me hit the unmute first. How do I become a participant in one of these projects?
Well, I think it's certainly you can work back through Pat and Engineers Without Borders, and I know that your club has also got, your district has got some projects in Guatemala, particularly in the Esquintla area and Lake Atilan, right, Pat?
Yes.
Looking at your head bobbing up and down.
Yeah,
so
we at this point are not able to travel, but we threw our DDF for Area 4 from the project that we were not able to proceed with on the strength of Mike and past District Governor Julio Gracios to that very Esquintla Hospital COVID-19 response global grant that Mike spoke to. So Joel, we have skin in the game in that one. Whether we could travel there remains to be seen, not in the near term.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Mike.
Carrie, you have a question.
Oh, it's Dale. Actually, I'm on my wife's laptop.
Okay, sorry, Dale. I didn't know. I was just looking at the participant list. So Dale.
No, I just wondered, I know that in Nicaragua and some other places, Pat Coyle and his various efforts have had periods of hiatus because of security issues. Has that been a problem for Mike and his area of endeavor?
yeah, fortunately, we haven't had too much trouble in Guatemala for security purposes. Of course, with COVID-19, they've been under a pretty serious lockdown. And when Guatemala locks down, they really lock down. For example, it's against the law to even drive a vehicle in Guatemala, let alone travel from state to state or department to department. So it is very difficult to move around. Our Rotarian partners, as well as the Engineers Without Borders staff there, were able to receive travel waivers and letters from the Minister of Health himself personally. So we have been able to move around, get to the hospitals and do the work like the well repairs that we talked about. And of course, delivering some of the PPE items. But it's been a bit of a challenge. We had one of our textile factories got shut down because of the lockdown, and we had to 2 days later finally get them released, and when we demonstrated that they were truly an essential service. So COVID is making all of us get as creative as we possibly can.
Thanks.
All right. And Kathy Coyle, you had a question.
Well, it's not just a question. It's like, it just reminds me how important water is in our life and that we take it for granted. And to see a group of people working so hard like this, and they're doing the same thing in Nicaragua, just brings tears to my eyes. And I agree with Mike that these global grants bring rewards to us that we don't expect. And so thank you very much, Mike, for your presentation. I'm really quite moved.
Well, I think that the important message too, Kathy, is the works that you guys are doing in Nicaragua and other parts of the country is that they're not just short-term projects, but they deliver very long-term benefits, right? These are generational changes for communities, especially for the young girls in these communities. And I think, you know, we get the short-term view of it from we see, you know, how things work when we open the project, but it really opened my eyes when I could go back 10 years later and see some of the real impacts in the community. And after those barriers are removed by Rotary, people are able to just go and do amazing things on their own.
So any last call for questions for Mike? So Mike, just to echo, I think what Kathy said and other people have said in the chats, just a wonderful presentation. And our Kelly Bowers, our superintendent of schools here in Livermore, just really enjoyed the part about education and giving these young girls access. I think that's kind of what struck home for many of us is I would hate as a mother to have to choose which daughter gets education and which gets to carry water. So it's so powerful and what we take for granted here. So thank you very much for your very kind of informational and inspirational presentation. And I just remind everybody, bridgingbarriers.com, which was Mike's about the book. And I'm sure that Kathy will put that in the spur so that you have the link there as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we're grateful for the Zoom technology that allowed you to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. It's always great talking to Rotarians.
So that is it for another Zoom meeting of the Rotary Foundation, or excuse me, the Rotary Club of Livermore. I'll get my tongue untwisted there. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and I hope that you'll join us next week. Remember that we'll be hearing from our own Ken Perrine doing a presentation on unconscious bias. And it was wonderful to see all of your faces today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Those who are willing to help out with Zoom, could you stay on for